Instructional design projects typically require OPWL practitioners to create new deliverables at the same time they're revising existing ones, and all while planning their next steps. How can instructional designers be 3 places at once? Members of Team Credit Union Fraud will discuss how they use Trello to manage their project for the OPWL 537 design course. During their time with us, Team CUF will share their experiences completing the ID project. Specifically, they'll introduce their project, describe how they use Trello, describe the other tools they use, and describe how their team used these tools to collaborate in ways that help them complete the ID project. Lori Simkins, Daniel Dale, Jennifer Ratliff, and Kelly Jackson, we're delighted to have Team CUF with us today. Take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to introduce our project. Like Steve said, we are Team CUF, Credit Union Fraud. So our project was working with the fraud manager at a credit union. His responsibility are to receive notification of fraud through different methods, one of which is through branch employees. The fraud department helps the branch employees deal directly with members who have been victims of fraud, and together they investigate fraudulent checks and card transactions. We focused on just fraudulent checks in this project. So our fraud manager's responsibilities were to manage the daily operations of a team of fraud investigators, develop and implement new approaches and procedures to improve efficiency and effectiveness of the department, assist senior manager in developing solutions to mitigate fraud trends, and monitor and track the fraud volume, escalations and alerts, and keep agents aware of cases being worked. And so our strategic business objectives of this training was we want our branch employees to recognize potential fraudulent checks and take action that maintain or improve member satisfaction ratings, obtain crucial evidence from our members or non-members committing the fraud, and reduce the credit union's losses of fraud. Fraud in the banking industry is a serious problem that's on the rise. This is from the American Banking Association. Losses due to fraud reached $2.2 billion in 2016, and approximately 35% of those were due to check fraud. The credit union that we worked with is not exempt from this problem. They currently lose approximately $40 million each year due to check fraud. So it's important for us to find a way to help branch employees recognize the fraud. So how we did that is we created an in-person training for our new hire class. So all new branch employees would take this training. They would receive job aids and know where to look on the knowledge management system for help in detecting fraud. And we worked through role plays with them where they actually got to look at fraudulent checks. So we'll have Trello to talk about how we work together to make this training.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kelly Jackson, a member of Team CUF, and I'm going to talk about how we use Trello to help us manage our project. We use Trello primarily as a tool to help us manage our meetings and to manage our deliverable dates. We chose this because a couple of us on the team had experience with it before, and we thought it provided a very efficient and streamlined way for us to be able to take one look and be able to see the status of each meeting and each deliverable in real time. So what you're looking at is our actual Trello board. I have moved some things around and changed some of the dates around just for the purposes of this webinar to be able to illustrate how we used it. But the way that a Trello board is set up, if you're not familiar, you start with making lists. And we created 6 lists to manage our project. Upcoming meetings, upcoming assignments, work in progress, pending review, completed assignments, and past meetings. So upcoming meetings and upcoming assignments are both fairly self-explanatory. It's where we listed any meetings that we had coming up or any assignments that were pending. Each of these lists started off with every single meeting and every single assignment that we had planned for the entire semester, with things added in as we decided that we needed to add something, but it started off with the total picture for the semester. Items moved into a work in progress status as we started working on them. So here, for the purpose of this illustration, we have instructional plan pass 1 as a work in progress. From there, items moved into a pending review status, and this was pending an internal review by the team. Once an item had been submitted, it moved into a completed assignments, into the completed assignments list. And then past meetings is where we tracked a meeting after it had taken place. Now, with each of these lists, you'll notice a number of items below, and these in Trello speak are referred to as cards. So for upcoming meetings, each of these cards represents a single meeting that is pending. There are a lot of things that you can do with cards. You'll notice that they have a variety of different kinds of icons that you'll see looking at all of the cards. So if we just take a look here at this team touch base call, first, you'll note that you can assign a card a due date. And it can be a due date and time. This is something that can be changed as it needs to be. A description can be added to the card, and then comments can be added. And every single change that happens with a card is tracked here in this activity list. Additionally, we'll take a look as we get into some of the assignment cards. A card can be assigned to a member of the team. So if I wanted to assign this card to Danielle, I would just be able to click members and then assign that to her and flagged for that card. The assigning to a member became very helpful to us as we started working through assignments. We'll get into this a little bit more when we talk about how we used our collaboration tools. But each of us took the lead on different components of the project, and so we used the member assignment to help us facilitate that. So, for example, this is Lori's lovely photo here. She had the lead on pass 2 of the performance assessment instrument. Another helpful feature of the cards is that you can attach files to them. So let's see. Trying to see when I know we have a few that have files attached, and I'd made a note of that and misplaced my note. Here we are. So pass 1 of the learner analysis, when we got our feedback on that, we attached the deliverable and the feedback here so that it made it convenient for us to have all of that information in one place. All right, so that is how our Trello board worked. The one other comment that I will add is I've found that this structure of using these particular 6 lists, it's high level and generic enough that I've found that it transfers from this project and can be applied to other projects. It's the same structure for a board that I'm using in my needs assessment class this semester. And so it's something that I really recommend. It's generic and widely applicable. So I will now hand off and we'll talk about how we collaborated using our tools.
All right, so we used Google Drive and Google Docs to collaborate on our different documents that we had. Google Drive was an excellent way for us to combine all our documents into one place. If you're not familiar with it, you're also able to access these documents from anywhere, so you don't have to have it worried about it saved on a particular computer. You can access it from your work computer, your home computer, wherever you need to work on it at that time. I'll show you a couple of different documents we used. So for example, in our performance analysis, we were able to pull in the Word document, create it into a Google Docs, and then we split up the different areas that we were working on. And it allowed us to all work on one document in real time instead of waiting for us to pass the document along between person to person and email it back and forth. It also saves automatically, so you don't have to worry about losing any of your work if your computer crashes. And then there's also no worries about having multiple documents because it's all one document in one place. As you can see here, we collaborated on the sides by adding comments to different sections. So if we had questions about something, we're able to ask it and answer that relatively quickly without, again, worrying about the email back and forth. And then as things were addressed, we could resolve those comments. You can also use features like signing off on the documents, like just creating a comment and having people initial. And then if two people happen to be in the document at the same time, you can also just use a chat feature. This will show you all your comments, but you can also just chat with that person in real time as well. And then we also used it to import some of Steve's feedback on our past ones. We would import his comments, and then that would make sure that we addressed them in past too. So we could go through, see what he had commented on, and then resolve those as we were getting ready to submit past two of our assignments. And then as we completed everything, you are able to just download this as a Word doc. So we could submit that as a Word doc and go back and forth between those different file types. Another collaboration tool that we used was WebEx. Really, any type of meeting software will work as long as I would recommend having something that will allow screen share. Google Docs also can work with that. If you're just on a phone call and you want to pull up Google Docs and everyone's looking at the same document, that works too. We did that a lot of the time. But WebEx just made it easier for us to call into one number and then share our screen with whatever we needed to talk about. With that, Jennifer's going to talk a little bit more in depth about how we collaborated with our different tools.
We've covered the tools, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we actually use those tools to collaborate, even though Kelly and Danielle have touched on it. It really was, we used Trello, Google Drive, and WebEx to work together to create our deliverables for this project. Trello for project management, Google Drive to work on and review each deliverable, and WebEx to meet with each other and work through open items, questions, and problems, and to plan our next steps. It wasn't just one tool that helped us to collaborate successfully. It really was utilizing all three together. This was really important with us being in different time zones and having busy schedules, so we could work together despite the distance and time constraints. WebEx, Google Drive, and Trello, and communicating effectively and frequently through these tools and through email was key to our successful collaboration and successful deliverables. We always tried to stay aware of what was coming next in our schedule and stay ahead of it, and Trello was key to it. We had our entire schedule of deliverables with ID assignments and meetings on our Trello board, like Kelly showed you. We could see who was actively working on what was in review, and what was coming up to be worked on next. We also used Trello to share our meeting notes. So if we had taken notes in a weekly WebEx meeting, then we'd post them on the meeting in Trello, so if anyone missed a meeting or we needed to look back at our notes, we had a record of it. Google Docs was also important for our team's collaboration process. All of our deliverables lived on Google Docs, and by using Google Docs, we were able to work on the deliverables together. Everyone was able to see how it was coming along, we could peer review it, and suggest and make edits. It also helped to prevent versioning of our deliverables so we didn't have multiple working versions of the same document. Additionally, documents didn't need to be passed back and forth via email, so we were able to work on them at the same time, which helped save time in the long run. During our weekly WebEx meetings, we usually took a look at our Trello board to make sure we had it updated and to see what was coming up next. We'd also discuss any possible issues we may be facing or anticipating to get a deliverable completed on time by communicating anything that had come up in our personal or work schedules, issues we were facing on gathering info for a deliverable, any delay from a SME review, or anything we may not be clear on, so we could address and try to solve potential problems before they had an impact to our quality or on meeting our scheduled deadlines. Additionally, during our weekly WebEx meetings, we'd pull up the deliverables being submitted that week and make sure all of the comments, either SME, peer, or instructor comments, were all addressed. And if there was anything that hadn't been completed yet, we'd all work through it together to make sure we all felt the deliverable was ready to be submitted. Or at the least, we left the meeting knowing what still needed to be done so we could meet our deadline. There'd also be times during our weekly WebEx meeting when we'd all be in Google Docs, each working on a different section. Sometimes we'd barely even be talking to each other until we finished. And then having everyone on the call, though, meant that if a question came up, we could immediately get feedback. We didn't have to wait on a comment to get answered in the Google Doc. So overall, using these tools and communicating effectively as a group, we were able to successfully collaborate on this project to produce the deliverables and meet our clients' expectations, as well as be successful in the class. And with that, is there any questions?
So please feel free to type questions in the chat window. I'd like to get started while we're waiting. It seems like you were able to use Google Docs in a way that let everyone collaborate. So in terms of how you approached creating a project deliverable, did you always work on it together, or did somebody start it, present it to everybody, and you modified it together, and then it went back to an individual? How did your internal process work for creating a given agenda? A given deliverable?
Okay, so in our Trello boards, we had assigned each of us to different deliverables, and we usually worked on both the past one and past two for the same deliverable, and we tried to space it out so like every fourth one, like it would be Kelly would have the first deliverable, and then Danielle, then Lori, then me, and then Kelly, Danielle, Lori, me. And then we would start it, and then it would be on Google Docs. And if there was something we had a question on or we needed help on, we could ask the rest of the group to help us, but we tried to keep one person as like the lead for each deliverable. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Valerie has a question. First, she says, good presentation. Your Trello format, she says, was really structured. Did you place any alerts on your cards when a particular project was delayed?
I can answer that one. For the most part, for our past ones, we didn't have any delays. With our past twos, we did have a little bit of delay there where we had planned it out where one person was in charge of the past one and then a past two had come up around the same time. And so some of those got a little delayed, and we would definitely address that in our weekly calls as well as in our Trello board. But we didn't actually place an alert on the card. In our weekly meetings, sometimes we would adjust a date to what would be more reasonable for that person to submit the past two.
I'm curious as to whether or not the team used formal agendas at your meeting, and if so, how you created and then used them.
We didn't actually use a formal agenda. We found that Trello guided our agenda. We started off talking about upcoming deliverables and any works in progress. So that really served as our agenda and drove our calls.
So Trello actually gives you a standard set of talking points for every meeting, and you were using it to structure the meeting as you went. Oh, that's really clever. So it meant that instead of doing a formal agenda first, you were able to avoid that, but you were still able to coordinate your work and prioritize what you needed to do.
Exactly. Exactly. And that was our purpose in building everything in upfront.
And the other thing I understand about Trello is as the team is doing its good work, those little cards tend to move from the left to the right, indicating overall status until finally something is considered done. Do I have that right?
You do. And so that's why I was saying that for the purpose of this presentation, I've moved things back into a variety of places just to be able to illustrate how it worked. But starting as we were preparing to present this webinar, everything was in the columns on the right, either completed assignments or past meetings.
Very cool. It's always neat to learn more about how teams actually do the voodoo they do. Shannon has a question. He says, hi, awesome presentation. In regard to Trello, I had a question about the entire board. Can I print out all the assignments, much as you would a project plan in Microsoft Project? I find that sometimes I may not be online and I'd like something to take with me to work on. Sometimes I find that looking at the entire plan helps me as well.
I don't know the answer to that one. Team, does anyone know? I did not have to print anything out. I've never tried printing out from Trello.
I haven't tried it.
I can try
tried
it right now.
Out. There is a mobile app for Trello, and so I've found that useful sometimes when I'm in meetings or away from my computer, that I can just pull up that app on my phone, but I've never tried to print it out.
You know, I do see, just looking in here now, there is a print and export setting. So it looks like it can be printed, exported as a CSV or as a JSON, which I'm not familiar with that format, but that can be done. The CSV export looks like it requires an upgrade. We're using the free version of Trello. With the paid version, you can export to a CSV, but you can print from the free version, it seems.
As teams get together and work, they typically go through a set of stages. There's a forming stage that's kind of like a wedding honeymoon because everyone is brilliant and passionate and smart and above average. And then because everyone's brilliant and passionate and smart above average, people start finding ways to disagree. It's not that somebody's trying to be difficult. It's that they're literally different ways of seeing things and doing things. And teams go through storming and norming. I'm wondering if you could share any of the conflicts you might have had and then how you work to resolve them. Or maybe how you work to resolve different ideas or different approaches and settle on one that you actually went with.
This is a tough question because I don't think we really had any conflict. There might have been a few times where we'd all be working on a doc and someone had a new idea, but we always took it as, well, this person has a new idea, maybe somebody else looking at this is also thinking that, so maybe we should try to address the issue. And I don't think there was ever like a hard conflict on anything.
Yeah, I don't think so either. We might have had different approaches, but and you know, just different ideas about how to do something, but I don't know that it ever reached the level of what I would call conflict.
No, I agree. We got really lucky with a good group.
We did.
And
I think the weekly conversations too really helped us all to communicate really well with each other. That's something with a lot of groups, you just try to do everything online because it's an online class, but having those weekly calls really helped to be able to talk things through.
And how long were your weekly calls?
They totally ranged. Sometimes they were 10 minutes, sometimes they were an hour and a half. It just depended what we needed to get done that week.
I would say it depended on the deliverable, how complex that was, because like Jennifer said, sometimes it was like, hey, everyone good? Yep, all right, well, we're done. And sometimes it's like, we really need to work through this document together. And I mean, one time it was probably like a couple hours we were working on a document on the phone just to make sure it got done.
One of the things that teams often do is find areas where, you know, after completing a task, they say, wow, we did that. And then they start thinking, well, we're going to have to do similar work in the future. How do we improve the way that we work in ways that, you know, have us working better and smarter and faster over time? Can you share some of the continuous improvement items that the team worked on during your project?
I know one thing is that we tried to learn from the feedback you gave us and not, you know, and learn, apply the lessons from one deliverable to the next one. Our goal was to try not to get the same comment twice.
I like that one. Obviously for selfish reasons. And so over time, you were able to make the read on my feedback increasingly more efficiently and effectively, right?
I think we were.
I think one thing we learned too is the first deliverable, we tried to all do parts at the same time, and nobody really had lead on that one. And so having somebody take lead on a deliverable really helped, because you knew who to reach out to with questions or comments, or even, oh, I have an idea of something we could put into this that would go really well, instead of just everyone trying to do everything. And then for the first deliverable too, we actually had a couple people start 2 different documents, so we had to merge those together. And then we learned when someone has the lead, they're going to start, and then you can just jump in and help at any time.
That's an interesting approach, because, you know, the idea that a project team is going to divide and conquer the work is pretty widespread. And when that works well, it works along the lines that you're describing. When it doesn't work well, it seems that project leads can, or deliverable leads, can find themselves working alone and not necessarily know who to go to for help, or that teams can take a viewpoint that, oh, you know, Steve is taking the lead on this, it's his problem, he needs to work independently because I'm going to be working later, or I'm working on my own. And from a project manager standpoint, I can typically tell when teams are adopting that approach where a lead is an independent agent. How did you work out the fact that you'd have a lead who has some responsibility and accountability, but not take that to the point where project leads worked in isolation?
So I think it was a lot to do with, we all took ownership that it's our team project. And even though we assigned specific individuals to lead a deliverable, so no one person got overwhelmed with work, we also knew that for us to be successful, we all had to work together to make sure everything was getting done to all of our standards.
I think with that too, the weekly meetings helped, because there were a couple times, maybe one time that we needed to switch leads because life happens, right? And we can't keep up with the assignments we had. And going back to a great group, everybody was willing to jump in and help where they could and take over if needed.
During the Trello demonstration, you mentioned the use of attachments. Is there a limit on the number of attachments and who can add them?
There's not a limitation on who can add them. if there is a limitation on the number, we did not reach it.
One of the things that I've wondered about in terms of the instructional design course is that, you know, no one in the OPWL workplace gets paid to use a wiki on Blackboard to post their work. And I'm wondering if it might be prudent to use a Trello board where the project deliverables already have the cards for the project deliverables already have attachments loaded for the handouts and for the templates. Would that be useful?
I don't know if I'm clear on exactly how you would use it.
I'm wondering if individual teams should be setting up their own Trello boards and then what are in those boards. Or maybe there is a generic Trello board that all teams can opt to use, and if so, what might be on it?
In terms of structure or in terms of cards?
First, in
I'm
terms
sorry,
of
team. I don't know if somebody else on the team is clearer than me, then jump in.
Let me try to
as far as the cards, I think that would be helpful to create a template card, kind of like how we had it set it up with all the different meetings and all the different deliverables, and then each team could take that, copy it, and make it their own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think those lists, the 6 lists, I think are generic and applied to a wide variety of situations.
Right, because you're using pretty much the same Trello board having gone from the ID course to the needs assessment course?
The exact same.
The exact same. Okay. So the Trello boards, at least, you know, given those 2 data points, don't seem to change that much. And then the specific deliverables in the needs assessment course, those end up being what? Just different cards in the same overall board structure?
Right. Right. Each deliverable has a card, and right now they're all upcoming assignments. We have upcoming meetings, et cetera, et cetera. It's the exact same structure. Just the cards are slightly, you know, they're different because the deliverables are different, obviously, but it's the same pattern.
There are different ways to use Google Drive. When you use Google Drive and Google Docs, were you always connected to a web browser?
I was,
but you can work offline.
Did anyone on the team work offline?
No, I didn't.
No, me either.
So having completed the instructional design course and having used a variety of tools to complete the ID project and to meet the course's learning outcomes, what advice would you have for incoming or current instructional design students?
I guess my advice would always be to always try to stay ahead of what was coming up next. That way, just because there's so many pieces, if you start falling behind, you're going to start falling behind on everything that follows.
absolutely agree. It really can cascade. The course has a lot of deliverables. So to the extent that you can be ahead of the deliverables, you will thank yourself. I would also add, probably similar to any project with group work, just communication with the team is vital to success. And the way that a team communicates can, vary with each team, but just defining something and then sticking with that.
Yeah, along with that, I would say the team charter is very important, that you create a good one. Kelly came in with a really good example that we were able to work off of and use as our way that we were going to communicate. So setting up a good team charter initially really helped us get everything to work smoothly, and then putting the due dates into Trello. And Kelly was also our on-point person, so she would make sure that we knew everything that was coming up, and we made sure we assigned that to different people to make sure that those assignments got done on time.
I would add to all of those are really good, but with your feedback on the deliverables, to really pay attention to those. There was a lot of times we were doing our past one and we'd be like, oh, in our feedback on 2 deliverables ago, Steve said this, and it would help us write that one so we didn't have to make as many changes to that deliverable.
We have a number of people who are online that are in the process of working on their own ID projects, or maybe working on projects in other courses. I think given that we don't seem to see more questions appearing in the chat window, we're coming to the point where we seem to have reached the end of this webinar. And I'd like to thank Lori and Danielle and Jennifer and Kelly for sharing their expertise and their experiences with us. Team CUF, you rock. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
This concludes our meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for being here.